Crafty Friends. Today I am bringing you guys a couple of cards that I am making using the Simon Says stamp card kit. This was the kit that came out in April, but with all the COVID, it was a huge delay, and I decided that I still wanted to do some cards with it. So this first card, I have already stamped out this lovely lady with some vellum, and I've gone into my Cricut and had it cut out several clouds, and I brought out a piece of the rainbow pattern paper that came with it, along with the mats for my card base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring out one of my card bases, and this is going to be for my inside panel, and this is just some light blue cardstock from my stash, and I'm going to take a simple sentiment from the kit, and I'm going to stamp that on the inside of my card. And this just says, after the storm comes the rainbow. And I'm going to mat that onto another piece of cardstock and I'm going to glue that down so that that will conclude the inside portion of our cards. I didn't really know what I was going to use these cards for, and because there weren't so many elements in this stamp set, it was just a 4x6 stamp set. I did not decorate the inside of the cards very much for this video. So now I'm going to take the other piece of the blue cardstock and I'm going to just kind of place my vellum piece over the top to kind of get an idea of where the placement will be. And I'm going to start to put that pattern paper where I think I'm going to want it to lay. I've taken it over to my guillotine trimmer and cut that piece in half because I just needed this one part of the rainbow. I'm going to place that where I want it to be in the center of my card panel, and I'm going to start arranging the clouds on the upper portion of this card panel. Once I get that done, I'm going to lay my lady down again just for placement purposes, and I'm going to prepare to bring out some embossing powder. This is going to be the Sandcastle embossing powder from Brutus Monroe, and I'm going to use embossing powder all over the bottom third of this card panel. So I brought out a piece of acetate. This is actually the cover for one of my Cricut mats. And I'm just taking my embossing stamp pad directly to the paper and stamping all over that just to get that good and saturated. And then I'm going to pour the Sandcastle embossing powder over the top of this. I really like this color, and more so than the look of sand, I was going for a look of concrete, and so I stamped this 3 times with the embossing powder and heat set that until it was really smooth and very melted, and I love the way that that came out. Now I'm going to place my panel over the top of that and go ahead and glue that down. So the rainbow portion will take up the second third of this card panel, and it will just slightly cover the portion of the panel that has the heat embossing. Once I have that glued down and give it an opportunity to dry, I will trim off those side portions so that it is even with the card base. Once I get that done, I'm going to start gluing together all of these clouds, and as you can see, I have a solid piece as well as a piece that kind of has some swirls cut out in it, just to give a little bit of dimension to these cards and to provide a little bit of interest to the cloud shapes that we have. And I used 2 different colors of the blue for the clouds, and I just overlapped them ever so slightly to create our scene. Now that that middle panel has had an opportunity to dry, I'm going to bring out a pair of my tonic shears and trim off the sides, and this is what our panel is going to look like. So once we have that done, I'm going to bring back in that piece that I stamped the lady with the umbrella on the vellum, and I'm going to start working on how I want her to be placed. And what I've done here is I've tucked the top portion of that vellum underneath that cloud that's hanging over, and I'm going to keep that excess part of the vellum and I'm going to wrap that around the base of the card in order to give me a place to adhere it so that my vellum does not have any type of adhesive showing. So I'm just kind of getting it the way that I want it to be and showing you guys. It kind of looks like the muted rainbow, and the ground is muted from the vellum, which provides a look of this kind of gray tone, which is what I was going for with this card. So once I have all of that done, I'm going to go ahead and glue that down to our second mat prior to placing it on the actual card base. Once I get that centered the way that I want it to be and have this looking how I want it, I will start working on the sentiment for the front of this card. And what I've chosen to do in regards to the sentiment for the front of the card is to use one of those sentiments that came in the stamp set. They had some pretty large sentiments, and this one says, "Thinking of you." And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stamp out that "Thinking of you" sentiment right there on the front of the card panel. And I'm going to heat emboss it with some of the sterling embossing powder. This is an ultra fine embossing powder by Brutus Monroe, and it stamps out very well. I did treat that with my anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to take that off to the side and I'm going to heat set it. Once I have that heat set, then we will be ready to go ahead and adhere this to a black card base. Again, this is just some Recollections 100-pound black cardstock that I use for any type of panels that I need that are not being worked on. So if I'm not coloring on them, not doing any ink blending or anything like that, and they just serve as my mats, that's what I use the Recollection 100-pound cardstock for. So now I have placed the inside portion to that card, and that will pretty much finish up the card number 1 for us. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to card number 2. Now with card number 2, I have brought out a piece of acetate, and I have some StazOn ink, and I have cut out about 10 of these pieces with my Cricut that have these stripes cut out of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the acetate over one of these panels that have the strips cut out, just so I can make sure that I am lining up the stamp with the lady the way that I want it to be lined up. And StazOn ink is a really good ink to use if you are going to be stamping on a slick surface. I keep that plastic piece on top of it because it keeps the stamp, the ink pad from drying out. So if you are using StazOn, make sure you keep that clear piece on the inside. And I am going to use my Misty. If you use a stamp block and you end up getting it smeared, alcohol is your friend when you're using StazOn, because you can simply wipe it off and stamp again. But we got a great impression on the first try. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to set that aside. And once I get that done, you can see how that looks with the pink cardstock behind it. I'm going to take those other, I think it was 9 pieces, and I'm going to glue them together. And you guys guessed it, we are going to be doing a bit of a shaker. And I say a bit of a shaker just because this one will not shake around so much, but I saw one of my crafty friends, Kathy Aranzana, do a card a while ago, and I'll try to find it and link it in the description box, where she used up a lot of sequins. And although I don't have a ton of sequins, I do have a ton of seed beads, and I thought that it would be so awesome to create kind of a rainbow theme type of shaker element for one of these cards with some of those seed beads that I had. So now you see that we have all of those done. It's done. It is pretty thick. So this would be one of those padded envelope or hand delivered type of cards that you would be delivering, just because of how thick it is. So I'm going to bring out another piece of that pattern paper that came in the kit, and I'm going to decide what part of it I want to show, if any of it shows. And this is just kind of a filler piece just in case you see any behind all of the seed beads, but you won't really see much of this background simply because I do fill in these areas pretty well. So I've gone ahead and I've adhered that down. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some of my 1/8 inch score tape and another piece of acetate, and I'm going to get ready to start putting that score tape all around. But before I do that, you see that I have gone ahead and I have cut off the excess of those, and we are going to go all the way around and in between each of these areas with that score tape. Now, I am not going to pull the release paper off the score tape yet. I am just placing this down right now, and then I will leave that on until I am completely done with adding in all of my seed beads. Now, you can do this one of two ways. I do it this way just simply because I have been able to be careful enough not to shake the seed beads around in the end. So I have this glass beading kit, which is from Doris, and I'm just going to take my time and I'm going to fill each of the areas in with a different color of seed beads until I get all the way to the end and have created a type of rainbow hue that goes from the red all the way down to the purple. So I took my time and tried to make sure that I kept all of my colors in the correct place. It wasn't too difficult to do, and as you can see, when we get toward the end, it creates a kind of rainbow with the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and we're going to end with the purple. Now the purple kind of sticks out, so I did take a few minutes and pull out any of the purple seed beads that fell into other areas, but for the other ones it wasn't too noticeable, and I didn't have a lot of overpouring, so I didn't worry about it as much. So now that I have all of these done, I am going to take my pokey tool and I'm going to very, very carefully remove all of the backing from the score tape for this panel. Once I get all of the score tape removed, I will then move on to adding a piece of acetate over the top. Now with this one, I did take a piece of acetate that was larger than the panel, just because it gives me a little bit of wiggle room and I prefer to just cut around it to get it even versus trying to make sure that I line it up perfectly by having the exact size for the card base. So I'm going around and making sure that I push down really well on this because these seed beads are pretty small, so I don't want them to fall out in any way. So once I get that on, I will be adding another layer of that score tape on top so that I can adhere this last piece of cardstock on top of that. And that will just provide the topping for our shaker element and kind of give that finishing look. So we've taken all of the score tape off and I'm just going to line that up. It was very easy to line up, and now we have that shaker element to go on the front of our card. So what I had in mind was that I would take this panel and I am going to bring in my Create a Sticker Station, and this is by Xyron, and I'm going to pull it all the way through. And what that's going to do with this acetate is it is going to make it very sticky all across the back, and it's going to create a sticky film the whole way over, so you won't really see any adhesive because the adhesive is across the entire backing of the card. Now, it did make the card base look just slightly misty, but because we're dealing with rain and rainbows, that actually worked to my advantage, so I really enjoyed it. I'm going to take a piece of pink shimmer cardstock. This cardstock came from a kit from Hero Arts some months ago, and so I'm going to use that, and I'm going to add it to a blue card mat for this card base. Once I get that done, then I'm going to adhere the shaker portion to the top of that as well. And once we get all of that adhered, that will create the front portion of our card. I'm just making sure that all of that adheres down really, really well because, like I said, this is a pretty thick card. And then I took another strip of that card stock, the rainbow card stock, and I decided to use some of my VersaFine Onyx Black ink and some of my sterling embossing powder to do a sentiment strip with some of the sentiments that are in the kit. And I take it off to the side and I heat set it, and this one is the sentiment that says, "Friend, follow the rainbows." So I really liked that one, and that was actually two different sentiments. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that at a slant on the left side so that it kind of follows the curve of the openings for the shaker pieces, and I cut it straight on the right edge, and then I'm going to adhere that flat down to the front of our card. So once I get that adhered down to the front of our card, I was feeling like it was a little bit plain at the front. So I decided that I would bring in some of my sequins to just give a little bit of extra interest to the front of the card. So I'm going to sprinkle those all over the front of the card base, and then once I have that completed, I will put this card down on its card base, and that will pretty much finish off our second card for today. I really love these sequins. These were a set of flat sequins that we got in a card kit from Simon. Not this card kit, but a previous kit. So that is card number 2. So now we are going to go ahead and we will finally be moving on to our third card. For our third card, I have decided that I want to create something with some of these pattern papers. Several of the backs of the pattern paper had hearts on them in the various rainbow colors. So I'm going to bring out my Misty, and I'm going to bring out the image with the lady once again, and I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool on all of these sheets, and I'm going to make sure I put that on very generously, and I'm going to bring out that sterling embossing powder again. Now what I'm going to do here, because this paper is pretty slick in the surface, I wanted to use my VersaFine Onyx Black ink just so that I could see a little bit better. And that was the reason that I was using my anti-static powder tool so very well. I'm just inking up, or trying to ink up, the umbrella portion of this stamp. That is the only part that I want. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to stamp it out on all the different colors that I picked out. I did a pink, a green, a purple, and a blue color, and I'm going to stamp those. Then I'm going to put the embossing powder all over them. Once I get the embossing powder all over it, I will set them aside. I'm going to do that for all 4 pieces, and then once I get all 4 of the pieces stamped out and embossed, then we will heat set them all at the same time. Once I get them all heat setted, and I have heat set And I have my heating tool set off to the side, heating up as I'm doing this. Because this paper is got a coating on it, I wanted to make sure my heat gun was very hot before I took it to the paper so that I could prevent any warping, and it worked out very well. I'm going to then cut out each of the umbrellas from the pattern paper. And these were very, very simple images to fussy cut. So I'm just going around each of them and cutting right next to the heat embossed line. And once I get all of these cut out, from the pattern paper, we are going to then move on to creating our card panel for this card. Like I said, these were super simple to cut out. They were a very easy fuzzy cut, so it took me maybe about 2 or 3 minutes to get all of these pieces cut out. And it wasn't really any fuss to do this. So now we have all 4 of them cut out. We can move on to creating our actual card base. So the idea that I had for this card was to bring in a image that I had stamped of the lady, and to use one lady who has the umbrella, and to have 4 additional umbrellas covering her. So I'm going to first bring out that cloud stencil that came with the kit, and I'm going to bring out a few of my Distress Oxide colors that kind of coordinate with the colors that we have for the umbrellas, and I'm going to do each side of the cloud and just stencil that on. No particular way, not really being super particular in how much color I'm getting laid down. I'm not trying to get any super blend or anything like that. I'm not even really too cautious about if any of the clouds from the inner portion of this stencil are colored in, kind of like how you see here. It's just to bring some interest to the panel of the card. I just did not want a stark white background, and so I thought that this would be fairly nice to do. Now the parts that are white, I did kind of go over them with the rest of the ink that was left on the brushes, just to kind of tone that down a little bit. And then once I was done with that, I brought out some shimmer spray and I sprayed the entire panel just to add some shimmer to our card. So I've gone ahead and I've stamped out one of the ladies, and I'm using all gray tones to color her in, with the exception of the skin tone that I will bring in to color her legs. And so what I decided was I was using some warm grays for her shoes, her belt, and her umbrella. Then I brought in some cool grays to color her dress. And then I brought in a super simple Copic combination to color in her skin tone. I used all of the gray tones. I think I went from W1 all the way out to W7 or W9 in order to do the umbrella. And then I used varying shades for the belt. I ended with a W5, and then I used some very light shades for her shoes. So we're going to go ahead and quickly color this in. This is not any type of significant Copic coloring. I just wanted to create kind of a gray look with her, and then to have the brightness come from the umbrellas that will be added to the card panel. So we're going to go ahead and get that colored in quickly. I did only go out to W7 for the umbrella, and then I'm going to work my way all the way back out to W1 to finish that off. Once I get done with that, we are going to move on to coloring in her dress. Now her dress, when I colored that in, again, super simple coloring. I did not do anything groundbreaking or earth shattering. However, I did attempt to showcase some of the pleats and the folds in her dress to help show the movement that was being portrayed by the illustrator of the image. So I'm just going back through and finishing up the umbrella, just to make sure that all of the colors show, and I have some variation from the inside of the umbrella all the way out. And then we will start working on her dress. Now I did create this as a dress and not just a shirt and a skirt. I guess you could color it either way you would like. And like I said, I did go in and where two places were meeting, as well as where the illustrator has given us lines to show movement, I did take those areas to bring in as my darkest places for the dress on this image. And so I'm just working my way from C9 all the way out to C3 in hopes that I can show some variation with the dress and show some movement within her skirt. We'll finish this up, and then once I get her done, again, I am going to go ahead and just fussy cut her out. This was a very simple image to fussy cut as well, and I think that it was easier to fussy cut simply because it was a larger image. I did not try to get the raindrops or the lines that are drawn in the image as part of the fussy cutting. That was not my focus of this image. I just wanted her in the image. So finally, I'm going to bring out a simple skin tone color, and that is what I'm going to be using to color in her legs. Once we get that colored, then that will be the end of the coloring portion for the I guess the whole video. I didn't do much coloring today, and the coloring that I did do was super simple. So now here we go. We have her all colored in. I'm going to bring in my scissors and I'm going to go ahead and fussy cut her. Remember, when you're doing fussy cutting, you are holding your scissors in your dominant hand, moving the paper with your non-dominant hand. So we've got her all cut out. I'm going to bring the panel back and I'm going to start laying out the way that I want this image to look. I'm going to bring out one of my card mats, and I did mat this a lot just because I wanted to make everything about this card very bright and cheery, kind of colorful. So I was trying to add in the different color that I used in multiple areas. So I did use that as far as the different panels of the cards, the umbrellas, the clouds, just to bring in some fun colors. So I'm going to go ahead and mat my two mats for my card together, and then we are going to go ahead and mat that top card panel onto both of the additional mats. And when I do my mats, I usually do about 1/4 of an inch down so that I can provide an 1/8 of an inch border all around my card base. So now we have her. I'm going to try to place her in the center of the card base. And then I am going to bring in that sentiment that says friend again. And then I had my Cricut write out a sentiment strip that says we have you covered. So that was kind of my idea for this card, was having several additional umbrellas just to kind of say to a friend, when you're going through something, you have people around you who will cover you while you are going through. So although she's gray, all of the other umbrellas are very bright and vibrant. And I'm just using this magnetic ruler that I received with my Make Art Station to line up this sentiment strip. It comes in super handy. I didn't even think that I would enjoy having this, but it has proven to be very, very beneficial. So now that I have both of the sentiments tacked down, I'm going to go ahead and tack her down flat on the card panel. And then once I have her tacked down, I'm going to use a single layer of foam tape for the two umbrellas that are closest to her, and the two outside umbrellas I'm going to use a double layer of foam tape just to give some dimension to this card panel. So we're going to go ahead and start getting those positioned where we want them to be, and I'm trying to do kind of an arch with all of the umbrellas, making sure that they all fit nicely on the card panel, but also I want to show a little bit of the umbrella from the original image as well. So I'm going to go ahead, and I haven't really tacked these down too much. Most time I can move my foam tape around a bit before I actually push down on it. So I usually just sit it down lightly before I make a commitment. So once I have everything kind of where I want it to be, I am going to go ahead and bring in some silver lining Nuvo drops, and I'm going to put a circle in the center of each of the umbrellas, and then I'm going to sprinkle a few drops around on the actual card base to kind of tie everything together. Now, once I have all of that placed on there, I will be able to put the card down on the card base. Now, I probably should have done that before adding Nuvo drops, but I was able to do it without smearing any of the drops. So, just a word of caution, please try to do that prior to putting it on the card base. So I'm going to go ahead and do the inside panels of my cards. I triple matted them as well and placed them on the inside of the card. Like I said, I did not do any type of decorating to the inside of my cards this time, simply because I did not really have any person in mind when I was creating the cards. So I will probably go back and decorate them as I send them out. And I think because there were not additional images in the stamp set, it made me feel a little limited to decorating the inside, because I did not want to pull in a lot of excess stamps when using this card kit. So there we go. That is the end. That is all of the cards for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed, and I will hope to chat with you in the